Um, I can still see that there's a lot of animated dialogue happening. Obviously, the juices are still flowing, but what we were doing, I think we've harnessed the first level of thinking at a group level, and I must say across at least the groups that there are some common themes emerging. Uh, w- w- what we'll attempt to do is I'll share with you some of the themes I have heard, and I'm sure if there are some things further that Prabha may have heard, she'll also contribute to them. The question was, where do we need a transformation? And I think a lot of groups are in synergy at one level, transforming education to become much more solution oriented and less rote learning. Uh, Clearly into the future of of Karnataka, whether we can be a hub there from being just the IT hub. Can we become the creative application hub is really at education level is what I'm hearing everybody say. Uh, is one major area. The second area which was running through a lot, especially addressing the economic disparity between Bangalore and the rest of Karnataka, was how do we transform the number of employment opportunities across? How do we really multiply that? Was the second big area which is happening so that it's not all localized to Bangalore but beyond Bangalore, employment opportunities? Was the second big one. The third big, area which is emerging is also in terms of farming, two areas. One is productivity and the second was sustainable farming, especially with the impact of water being a water stressed state especially. So really, how do you embed sustainable and productive farming, productivity, both going hand in hand? And there's no reason why one is at the cost of the other. So sustainable and more productive farming practices is surely one challenge for us moving forward. And while there was a lot of dialogue, yeah, I did hear healthcare. Which are the sectors, the tables which brought up healthcare also? The healthcare, access to healthcare, really again economic disparity question, ensuring equal access to healthcare. And some tables took it further to see preventive healthcare. So healthcare certainly seems to be an area which a lot of groups have highlighted. And finally, while Bangalore remained a touchy point in all the dialogues, I think in this group what I heard was to make Bangalore a role model of sustainable development, both for environment, traffic, is really what we should aim for. And so it does not become the choke point that it is today. So these seem to be the first level. Uh, what we will get, have I missed any area? Energy. So access to energy. Now is it access to points which don't have access today? Is that what we are talking about, or consistency? So basically ensuring uniform access to energy. Actually, yes, in employment opportunities, there was, I think, this entrepreneurial piece has also emerged, that which was that employment opportunities, but some groups reframed it to say multiply the number of micro entrepreneurs. So, so that seems to be better placement.
In both the groups I facilitated, the issue of public administration came up. And one of the insights was there's still a silo mentality, so that even if a good solution comes, nobody in government, in state, or even city knows who to take it forward.
Sure, sure, sure. So I would think that from the viewpoint of accelerating innovation, cross-learning platforms seems to be surely a challenge. And if I think if I'd be okay if we say employment opportunities, reframe it as multiplying the number of micro entrepreneurs, because essentially people who employ micro entrepreneur, classically definition is 3 to 5 people he employs, but so many more multipliers across. That would also deal with the employment question. So these seem to be the core themes which have emerged. What we'll move on to now is we'll come back to another dialogue and progress this further immediately after the panel discussion. Amit.
Thank you. Thanks, Narang Saab. So very quickly, we'll go on to the next panel. But what is emerging here, that there is nothing like a high-tech or a low-tech industry, but it's about high-tech and low-tech firms. So we have to really move ahead on innovation and what are the steps required. So can I now request Nitin to come forward and help us moderate the panel? So we have some very interesting panelists here. We have Chirantan here. Can I see Chirantan around? Yes, Chirantan is here. We have Siddharth Malik. Siddharth doesn't seem to be here. In fact, And then, of course, we have Vijay. Vijay. Neera, Vijay probably stepped out. Oh, yes, okay. Karthik? Yes, Karthik, please. And then, can I request one of my very interesting friends who has actually done a lot of policy work? He's probably not aware of it, but I wanted to do a cold call, and his name is Srikanth Srinivas. So Srikanth has been a great editor, great writer, and a great policy analyst. So that is where it is, and it's a privilege to have known him for a long time now. So Srikanth, Nitin, over to you. You have exactly 30 minutes, right? And then we'll go on to another dialogue on policy and try to get some insights out of it. Thank you. And from here, our dear friend Wilfred will be the person who's handling the next set of things as master of ceremony or whatever you might want to say. Thank you.
To your party.
Somebody left his phone here, please.
You are Karthik, yes. Okay. So, good morning. I think the idea is, I was supposed to be a panelist, and before I was thrust into the middle, I didn't ask for this, but I'm here. So what I thought, I'll return the favor by, let's just make this as controversial as possible. So the request I have for all the panelists is not to agree with each other. Right? So even if you feel that, yeah, education is the most important thing, which everybody is, so one of you please disagree, right? Because at least then we'll have some interest in this conversation, right? In the sense that we can bring out ideas which might be lying at the back of our minds, but we're just not bringing it forward. So I think the charter for this panel is to, steps for success, right? What do we need in order to succeed? So let me start the ball rolling by talking about two things which might be unpopular given the context of everything that we've spoken about. First is that for many of the things that we've been talking about this morning, whether it's education, healthcare, Sharad was here, if Sharad is not here yet, but that's one of the arguments I always have with Sharad when he talks about technology, solving problems or everything. See, a lot of these social challenges which Srinivas and I were talking about require the role of the state or the government. Right? This is bang in the territory of the government because only the government has the scale, the legitimacy, the authority, and in a democracy, the power to execute a project like education, large number of people, bringing healthcare, regulating traffic, acquiring land for public works, etc. It's in the hands of the government, right? So whatever we do as non-government people, therefore, will be either complementing the government, helping the government, or substituting the government. The last one is the most dangerous, right? Because to the extent that our work is to help the government do what it's supposed to do, push the government do what it's supposed to do, we are fine. But the moment we get into the territory, we cross the line and get into the area of doing what the government is supposed to do. Like let's say I stand in the middle of the road and start regulating traffic. I'm doing the public a service, but that one person who's supposed to do traffic is now free. The taxpayers' money which went to supporting this guy is free, this person is free. What happens to the money? What happens to the person? Usually when that happens, bad and nasty things happen because the government has budget and resources to do all sorts of stupid things. And they do all sorts of stupid things.
Can I disagree with you?
Yeah, you can disagree with me, especially if you are part of government. Okay, that's number one. So the first thought I want to share with the panel and with you is that let's be careful in the kind of projects we take on ourselves, because if we try and substitute government, there are negative consequences thereof, and the unintended consequences of our own desires and activities might not be something we can handle. Number two is a lot of competitiveness work requires us to look at basically areas of industry, areas of the economy where we can leapfrog. And this is some of the things we've not done yet. Right? We've not looked at, we've talked about FTBT IT, right? That's a nice framework which Dr. Prakash gave us. But what specifically are areas where Karnataka has a competitive advantage with respect to other states in the country and with respect to other economies of the world, which helps us to get competitiveness, right? So this is bang where people like us have a role to play because the factors are within our control. Whereas getting the government to fix the streets is a democratic process. It's not really a private sector industry job, right? So let's take these two motifs. We'll do one round on each. And since you disagreed first, you should be the last to speak.
Sure.
We'll get the first to speak.
That's a good incentive.
Yeah, that's the. So what we'll do is just let's talk about, are we, by trying to be successful in competitiveness and others, doing the kind of stuff which helps the government and supports helps the government to do its job better, or the risks of doing too much and letting the government off the hook and allowing it to do something else? You first.
Well, I'm going first? Okay,
Yeah.
that's not a bad reward. Okay, so I think my view is that the government, we overestimate the role of government in this country. I think business is what it is today, not because government helped us, but because government in some ways stepped away from it and they made way for it. So I think in some ways what government has to do is to not even exist in our minds. What if the government is not there, right? What kind of things we are doing? I think we did all of this despite having a government is what I would say. So I think in my view, there are two things that we need to focus on if we have to spur competitiveness in this economy. I think.
Can I borrow your watch?
Sure.
Isn't Amit already keeping track?
Yeah, it's okay.
I think one key thing we need to kind of understand is to kind of have a counterintuitive thinking, right? I think that's where I loved your comment about creating controversy is go against conventional wisdom, right? And that doesn't happen necessarily whether it's in this room or in the colleges we teach or the companies that we work for. Sometimes what is conceived as a generally accepted thing may go counterintuitive. So one of the greatest examples of this is we were talking about Ola and Uber, right? Today, established companies are competing against the new entrants, whether it's e-commerce, whether it's taxi services, where in the earlier times, people used to make money from customers and give it back to their investors. Today, you take money from investors and give it back to your customers. So when that business model is changing like that, how do you compete, right? I think that is happening, that should happen in some way, not only in the tech sector, but it should happen in other industries. Okay. Whether it's incubators or
Let me just pause you there. I have a watch, Timex 1854 Intelligence Quartz watch. It's my watch. Anyone wants to buy this? I'm selling it for 200 rupees.
A lot of emphasis for education. So we have the PIES, which is your surname, from Manipal. So we have a huge amount of education as our bottom line. But now is the problem. I have just shared it with Mr. Wilford and I have Linda. Linda is from US. The difference between US education system and I was just sharing with Mr. Amit that he should become the education reformist and he should write a paper to the government of India that on the first agenda should be education reform. Why I am telling you? Because can you believe in an engineering college in Bangalore, they teach C++. There is nothing go-to-market education. So where is innovation? Why do you think you don't have a Mark Zuckerberg at a college level getting generated in India? Because our education system is 1950s. I have my daughter who is studying in one of the best engineering college. She was ranked #1 in India and she got in IIT and I was just asking her what's your syllabus and she's in computer science. Can you believe she's being taught in the first year mechanical engineering?
Okay.
What is she going to do with mechanical engineering?
He's
so that's
waiting
the
for a while.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Srinivas.
So, can we reform education? Then we are looking at innovation 20 years
I
from
want you
today.
to disagree about education.
I will disagree.
I
Do
like
you disagree?
No. This is for the heck of it.
Yeah.
I think we underestimate the role that government can play. We all imagine that the private sector changes and that governments don't change. That's incorrect. Governments also change in response to changing circumstances. We tend to treat government as if being this silo that hasn't changed since the 1950s. That's not true, number one. It doesn't seem, that is not to say that they've progressed as much as they should have. But the fact is, whether it comes to innovation or not, government is going to be a key player for two reasons. One, the scale of the problems to which we look for innovative solutions and the scale at which government seems to look at them are different. If you're talking about poverty reduction, the scale of the problem is measured in millions. Innovative solutions, as somebody already mentioned, tend to pick up packets. I think from all that we see, we have a lot of people looking at building small packets for the same problem, but not for, shall we say, adjacent solutions. I think that's one thing that one may need to consider, that whether government should be, whether innovators should be looking at a spectrum of problems rather than one particular problem. The second thing I'd like to point out in certain respects, I just was, thinking aloud is, we've had this experience in Bangalore. I'm going to quickly tell a story which I've already told once about what is possible, and I'm curious about why this doesn't work. It's more of a question. In 1992, Vijay Mallya chaired a particular committee which predates the Bangalore Action Task Force, which looked at reducing the accident rates in Bangalore city. We had this big board that gave daily fatality rates, etc. And so they went out and undertook an exercise, and they discovered that accidents happen in the same place. There is a pattern to the entire accidents. They happen in certain spaces. They happen at certain points of time. And this knowledge was available to the traffic constable on the street, but there was no way of translating that information up to where people take decisions on traffic management and where they ought to put the resources. And technology subsequently provided the solution. But guess what? That never went anywhere. Bangalore's fatality rates are still pretty high. For other reasons maybe, but are stuck. And I think that one of the things that as innovators we also need to look at is, how do you work with government? Government is not going to supply all the answers. I think this is about working with government, not working against it. No, not even against. I don't think anybody works against government. It's an impossible proposition. You can't. So working with government in the same way that I just think that we need to think about how you can partner with government. That's the right word.
Or have a dialogue.
Yeah,
dialogue.
maybe.
I think just one quick point about education, right? I think we all agree that education is absolutely critical, but education beyond a point becomes not necessarily a value add, right? There are always examples of entrepreneurs who never completed college, CEOs who did not do MBA. There are always examples of that. I think what we lack is our education to teach us the risk-taking ability. Your comment about Mark Zuckerberg, he discontinued from his college. He just went against his college. He got into a lot of trouble. Whereas if India, if you get into a lot of trouble, you end up writing 2 states book or directing a movie. So I think that risk-taking ability and the survivalistic attitude, our education system needs to think about it.
Yeah, and I think I just want to pick up from there, and I wrote about it recently also. The preoccupation. Okay, first point is that there's an amazing amount of innovation startups and people getting, discarding the idea of working for Akamai and starting up companies and, working for no salary, sleeping on the floor and all that. That's happening all around us as we speak. And a lot of venture money has also gone in. So it's a great time to be in Bangalore and Karnataka, because it's also happening in Mysore and other places. But what I found when it's like a pop survey of many of these guys are mostly trying to solve problems of their own neighborhood or their city, right? So as opposed to a Silicon Valley mentality, because your dream is to conquer the world. The day you start, you're trying to build a product or a service that conquers the world. We are trying to build a service which solves Bangalore's traffic problems or, auto rickshaw problems, right? So I think there is a merit in us trying to solve our own problems, right? Because there are problems. If you don't get an auto rickshaw, you can't get out of home. So, but it can't be that 100% of our talented population is solving those problems, right? You need at least 10%, 5%, a small number, but a significant number of people trying to conquer the world. Yeah. And that's not quite happening.
I think that's my point about counterintuitive thinking, right? I think earlier, businesses were all driven by profitability, as you said. But now, no, there are companies that don't care about profitability. They don't care about, like Android, for example, 80% market share in smartphones. They charge people $0. They make money through ads. Ola and Uber, for example, they take money from investors and put it back. So we need to encourage that counterintuitive thinking, at least in the 5 to 10%, as you
right. And have a sort of a global, let's conquer the world kind of mindset.
I have a small point to make. So yesterday night I received a WhatsApp message from a friend who started something which is mimicking Practo, but then has pivoted, knowing that he might not get enough funding because Practo and some others are already in that space. So looking at that conversation, I started thinking that if today somebody cited that X thousand startups in the country, 30% of that will be in Karnataka, how is funding, and some of us have already mentioned that the Russians and the others in the world, maybe there is some frivolous funding. Where is the research on pivoting happening from the original unmet need into which the entrepreneurship was going into to something more guided by venture capital investing? Why aren't we building the data sets on that? Why is it that there's a traction.com just underneath that Silk Board highway and you go and talk to them and you don't know whether their sample is rightly selected? A government can do a great deal here to work with the registrar of companies to fill out forms by employers and employees as to who is leaving the job, who is getting self-employed. These are data sets that Bureau of Economic BEA in US or even anywhere else. I mean, there are some other countries. Let's not always pick US as an example. We can use that research to guide our policy.
But you know, the problem is because the fact that giving information to the government in India is always seen as a compliance exercise. It's not seen as a survey exercise. So whenever the government comes and says, how many cars do you have, right? I get scared, you know, what does he want about me? Why does he want to know about how many cars I have? You know, it's not that he's trying to figure out how many cars are being driven in Bangalore. So there is and the government is at fault here because usually when government asks you questions, like, do you have a two-wheeler in your house? If you say yes, then you're above the poverty line.
Actually, there are some examples playing counterintuitive to what you're saying. The government is not overawing whoever is being asked for information. So if you go to the Gujarat State FDA, which is doing some nice work on tracking and drug recall work, Mr. Koshia there, you'll see there's a nice partnership. The word I loved there was partnership that's happening, where he's pulling back information. The CDSCO nationally doesn't have a drug tracking and recalls information, and we keep the Chhattisgarhs happening every now and then. But Gujarat is creating that benchmark where government is not overawing the folks who have to provide the information. And that is now, he's getting the mandate from CDSCO, okay, go and teach other states. So I don't believe that at an aggregate level, government is always intimidating folks by asking for information. And it's a good time for us, as one of my Spanish friends in the table was saying, that we create the airports in Bangalore and then we don't know how to reach the airport. We create a World Exhibition Center in Tumkur and we don't know how to reach that World Exhibition Center. There's a very systematic need in this country over the next 30 years to do research and guide the policy making through evidence. And if we don't do that, we'll keep repeating those mistakes, whether it's in startup policy making, intellectual property policy making, and this is where interdisciplinary thinking can come. This is where a Bangalore's creative economy like an ISC, an IMB, and NCBS can come together and not just sign MOUs on paper. The other aspect here is, I have found in my 4 years of coming back to the country, is that our institutions, governments, private, are so people-driven. I mean, people change, leaders change. But this processes should go on, right? I mean, a director changes in an IIT, trajectory changes of the IIT. Why should it be so person-driven? Is a concern that I want to place humbly on the table.
I just want to address that one point, and in partly in thing too. Everybody seems to think that difference of governments at central or state make a big difference.
Till Amit comes with this.
But from a political leadership point of view, Tamil Nadu stands out as what is apparently the most dysfunctional state. You go back into its history, the MGR first got elected on the ground that he would impose prohibition. 5 years later, he got re-elected as saying he'd repeal prohibition. I'm using popular mythology here. He is from Sri Lanka and a chief minister of a state which prides itself on being only the non-Sanskrit Dravidian state. Jayalalitha is from Mandya, Karnataka. Yet, every 5 years the government changes. Yet, you look at every possible societal ranking, Tamil Nadu stands better than our poster boy example of Gujarat. My question is, in innovation and others, why is it that what seems to be the most dysfunctional political leadership, that state stands far ahead on any societal measure you want to apply? Is there a lesson For us, so, do we, I don't know it's so much about inclusiveness. I think it's a matter of distinguishing between governance and government, which is, I think, in our dialogue and which is why it goes back to when we're talking about innovation and solutions, the people who are the intended beneficiaries of these solutions, are they taken into account? That's my
There's
point.
one success factor in Takshashila that's called staying to time, right? So we're going to, you get a chance to respond. You have 2 minutes. Just tell us whether the political culture in Karnataka will allow something like what's happening in Tamil Nadu to take place or not. The political culture.
No, Tamil Nadu political, I agree with him. It's much more integrate, and there is the best part of Tamil Nadu is it's a bi-party system. So because of that, and Tamil Nadu, why it has been so lucky is because for the last 25 years, it has had a favorable central government. So that's the main issue, and Karnataka has had a history of 20 years of non-favorable central government. So that is the main issue of Karnataka and Tamil Nadu.
Okay.
if you see
So
that-
the Tamils play their
One last
national
thing, I have
politics.
one question for you, Nitin.
Okay.
I agree with what you said on global focus. I want to ask you, when is the next Alibaba going to be founded in India?
I think it's already there, it's just that, it's called Flipkart. Right?
No, that's India focused.
Yeah, we're just waiting for them to go global.
You see that
No,
happening?
I don't think so. And I'll tell you very frankly, that's one of the problems. I was being frivolous and flippant when I responded.
Because I like what you said
Yeah.
on a global focus.
We-
I
we
don't
do-
see.
we are not
So are
that-
you seeing a Jack Ma coming out of Bangalore?
No, we are not seeing that yet, because the only company which was in that space was InMobi,
Okay.
which was trying to sell ads to the global space, but it's in a highly competitive market, and
Why do you think that will not happen?
because I think we are not imagining the world as our playground. We are just imagining that our playground ends at the borders of India.
Alibaba is going down, by the way.
Yeah, but
No,
they had a
whatever.
wrong.
They've had their 100.
So I think we'll have to end it here, because the organizers are about
Yeah.
to chase us out of the stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much for a very engaging discussion. Really enjoyed myself. And I used to live in Bangalore. Now I'm living in Chennai. I'm going to go back feeling much, much better. Just one picture. No, where is my piece of paper? We have one more conversation, which Rajiv will basically drive. And we have Shrikant, Subramaniam, Richi, Prasanna, Vivan, and Srinivas as the table leaders. Over to you. And I think we'll take about 20 minutes.
Actually, the 5 themes that we had evolved earlier, what we need from the group is, if you had to propose what are the paradigm shifts or the key shifts needed to succeed in those areas, what would those recommendations be? Because finally, for me and Amit to be able to share it with the government, the value will be, these are the 5 areas, and this is how, from a policy perspective, we need to approach them differently. For us to, like I think what I liked in the last one was the partnering with the government. So at least we live up to our part of the partnership. So what we'll do is, if you remember, we identified 5 areas. So we'll divide the tables, if we can cluster into 5 tables only. For each table, we'll pick up one of those 5 themes. And we have just a short time, so it's good that the 5 areas, just pass me that. So it's really, one was multiplying the number of micro entrepreneurs to grow employment opportunities. So really, can I suggest table number 1 here is for multiplying the number of micro entrepreneurs. So they will focus on that and suggest the 2 to 3 key paradigm shifts in policy needed, which will aid that. Right? So basically, what are we expecting from the government at one level, which will then facilitate this process or accelerate this? So this is table number 1 for multiplying the number of micro entrepreneurs. Then we had the second one, which everybody was passionate about, table here on, or the table can be in the middle, which is education, transforming education. And there the focus was, how do we make education far more interdisciplinary, solution-oriented, and not rote learning was really the big question there. That's while we said, yeah, Karnataka has been the first to create all those colleges. I think the Karnataka Education 2.0 is the question now. 2.1 was starting all the colleges. 2 is uplifting them. So that's, so what are your recommendations, the paradigm shift? So number 2 table, please, we'll pick up education. 3, sustainable farming, sustainable and productive farming. So how do we transform farm productivity and sustainability is the third big theme, which has emerged all along. And the fourth one was access to healthcare. So transforming access to healthcare across Karnataka was the fourth big theme. And, excuse me? Yeah, I'm just arriving at the fifth one. So if you have only 4, yeah, sustainable Bangalore. The role model and sustainable Bangalore. So we have 5, right? We had the employment opportunities, which is the micro entrepreneurs. Education was table number 2. Table number 3 here is access to healthcare. So I'm just dividing it randomly, so I have no premeditated viewpoint right now. And then we had sustainable Bangalore on table number 4 here. And we had, there was one more. Farming. Table number 5. So what I'm going to suggest is all people cluster into these 5 now. So just recluster into these 5 themes wherever your interest is. So please cluster into these 5. And so the key question, guys, as soon as you settle down, we'll identify the key question. So this is education, healthcare. It was supposed to be healthcare. So healthcare, farming, education, micro entrepreneurs are there. Employment, farming is there. Healthcare is here.